it's Tina. This video, I want to talk about my favorite series written by indie authors. So for the longest time, I only read indie authors. Part of it is because those books were cheap. And the other part is that when I talk to people about what I read, they're like, oh, have you read this author? And I was like, no, I read only indie authors. And I felt I was cool and different. Now granted, this was in my mid to late 20s and early 30s while saying this, but really it's because those books were cheap. And, I liked supporting indie authors because they're out there doing it themselves. I felt like I was doing a good deed. I found in reading only indie authors for the longest period of time, I have found a lot of not amazing books. And I have found a few books that I really enjoyed reading, or series that I've really enjoyed reading. And so I want to name my top 5 today. I'm going to put this in order from number 5 to my number 1. I'm going to put the first book in the series up here because if you haven't read the series, that's the book you're going to start with. We're going to start with number 5. Number 5 is a recent read. I read the series this year, and it's number 5 because the last book isn't out yet. It is the Dragon Portal series by Jamie Waters. The last book in the series is scheduled to come out October 22nd. As soon as that one comes out, I will definitely be reading that, and who knows, it may move up on the list. First book in the series is To Kill a Fae. This series starts off with Subine, who is a Fae royal who is hiding in I believe it's the human world, from her family because her brother and her dad wants to kill her. She's basically hiding in plain sight from them so they won't find her, so they won't kill her. And then Malik is a dragon shifter who is in the hunt for somebody with Fae blood so he can find these artifacts that hold magic that only a Fae can release so he can close a portal that if I remember right, it's failing. So he wants to close that, and he needs to find these artifacts, and he needs somebody with Fae blood to complete this task. Fae and dragons are mortal enemies. The dragons long ago basically tried to wipe out the Fae. The Fae have declared dragons their mortal enemies. Malik finds Subine, which is not only somebody with Fae blood, it is a royal Fae person. And Subine is interested in Malik, not knowing at first that he's a dragon. I love this series for the world, for the history of the Fae and the dragon conflict. The magic in this world is pretty interesting. The history behind Subine having to hide was pretty interesting. The romance is like an enemy to lovers romance, which was pretty cool. It is also, it's enemies to lovers, so it's a slow burn romance. So yeah, I'm really excited to see what the next book brings in this series. Number 4 on my list is the Unbinding Fate series from Colee, Firman. This is a young adult fantasy romance. The Unbinding Fate series is a series about an ancient race called the Colee, I think, Akori, who have ancient magical abilities. I can't remember why, but for some reason their worlds used to be connected. Like their world and the human world used to be connected, but they're broken for some reason somehow. It's been years since I've read this book, so this is from memory. Our main character, Addie, her family has been tasked or has sworn to protect the Akori that are on Earth, or Akori. She grew up with the Akori, and she has been groomed to take over and be the head person to protect these people. So it's about her journey with this. A whole bunch of stuff happens, so I don't want to... Why I like this series, this race of people's magic system, this race of people's world, their history, how they became to be stuck in the human world, why they're broken apart. I found the world captivating, and that was my drawing point to this series. The series is not perfect. The first book is not amazing. The romance in the first book kind of annoyed me, and Addie in the first book was extremely annoying to me. I'm not selling this book right now. And the pacing of these books sometimes are like breakneck fast, and then sometimes they're like super slow. So this is not a perfect series. I don't think it's written perfectly either. The world is what keeps me bringing back. I've read the series multiple times. I love the world in these books. Later on in the series, I like Addie a lot more. I love the villains in this series as well. It has interesting villains. That's why I like this series. It's not for everybody. It's not a perfect read, but I'm telling you my favorite series. Oh yeah, and the first book in that series is Dissever. Number 3 for me would be Wraith Kings from Grace Draven. This just has 2 books in the series, so it's a super quick read. But the first book in the series is called Radiance. This is a story about a political marriage between 2 different species. Brishan is of the K people, Idiko is a human, and Brishan perfectly content with not ever thinking he's going to be the king on the throne. Idiko is the king's niece, I believe. She knew growing up that she was going to have a political marriage. These 2 kingdoms decide that they want a treaty and to form an alliance, so they marry Brishan and Idiko. These 2 people believe each species is ugly. When they meet, they're repulsed by each other, but decide that they're going to, instead of revolt against this marriage, maybe make each other's life miserable, that they're just going to start with friends. So they decide that they're going to be friends and build a friendship and try to have a happy life that way. So what I liked about this book was the political intrigue, the K species and their culture, and how Idiko adapted to their culture, considering that Brishan's mother was a jerk. She kept putting Idiko through these situations where it was their culture's traditions, but wasn't necessarily appetizing or, according to Brishan, maybe a little bit unnecessary to put her through. His mother kept doing this on purpose to, it seems like, to set her up to fail, and so that his people would not like her or accept her, which I found was odd because she set up the marriage. That is why I like this book. And sometimes it's just refreshing to read about a love story that isn't completely angsty, and the 2 people decide, like, it's just a natural love. It's not instant love. It's just a nice, natural friends to lovers relationship. Okay, number 2 would be the Irin Chronicles from Elizabeth Hunter. Surprise, surprise. This series is about the Irin people who are descendants from fallen angels, but these angels, when called back, went up back to heaven. And they are warriors against the Grigori, who are descendants or children from the fallen angels that didn't go back up to heaven when called. We follow Malachi and Ava, Malachi is an Irin warrior who, again, his job is to track Grigori, who are feeding off humans to protect the humankind. Ava traveled to Istanbul because she was seeing a special doctor to help with voices she heard in her head. She has seen doctor after doctor. None of them really know what's going on with her. One of her doctors referred her to this doctor, and so she's there in Istanbul. She's also a photographer who does photography for like magazines and stuff. While she's in Istanbul, walking around in the city, she catches the attention of the Grigori, but they're not acting normal. They're like not going after taking her and feeding off her. They're more like following her, which is not normal for the Grigori, which catches the attention of Malachi, who his job is to track the Grigori and see what they're doing. So Malachi ends up following the Grigori, who are following Ava. So basically he starts following Ava. He gets more interested in Ava than he should. And that's how that relationship starts. The romance is not like a friends to lovers. I'm not sure what kind of romance to place it as, but it is a slow burn romance. And it also has a big mystery element into it because of Ava and what she can hear and who she really is. So they are trying to figure out who she really is. I like this series because of the Irin people, their history, their race, what they do. It's pretty fascinating, the world that is built here. The mystery behind Ava. The characters I really got attached to. There's great dialogue. There's really not much that I don't like about this series. Also, another reason why I like this series is because a lot of times in like paranormal romance or these types of series where it's a normal woman gets involved with a vampire or other or whatever, and she's thrust into this world, basically she loses her previous identity completely. In this series, that is not the case. Even though she's thrust into this other world, she still keeps her identity and then grows her own identity within this world. I really love that about this series. And Number one is also another series by Elizabeth Hunter. It is the Elemental series. The first book in the Elemental series is A Hidden Fire. Well, this series is a vampire series, vampire books. So the vampires in this world have elemental magic. When each vampire is sired, they get one, or they can manipulate one of the elemental magics: earth, air, water, fire. But there's also a drawback to that. Because of this extra magic, it affects them when they touch electronic things. Like, they really can't touch or work with anything electronic, like computers, phones, well, like cell phones, stuff like that. So that's an interesting take and a completely different spin on the vampire world. So we have Geo and Beatrice. Geo is the vampire. He is I can't remember what we'd call it. He's a guy that finds rare and ancient things. So people hire him to find this ancient rare thing, and he finds it and they pay him. And then we have Beatrice. Beatrice is a college student who is working at her college library, and I believe if I remember right, she wants to become a librarian or something of that sort. She wants to become a librarian. She wants to work with old text, books, stuff like that. So one of Geo's people asked him to translate a work of text into a different language for them. This text is in the same library that Beatrice works at. So that's how they meet. Geo is interested in Beatrice. He tries to convince himself that he's not, but he ends up hiring her to work with him and finding his rare things for his people because she is smart, she likes rare books, and she can touch a computer. And he's really attracted to her. But when you hang out with vampires, it's not exactly the safest thing to do. So obviously in this series, danger ensues. Beatrice is in danger. You know, a whole lot of vampire stuff happens, and you have, that's the plot. Why I like this series is the different spin that they have on the vampires. The vampires have an extra magic to them, so they have an extra thing, but they also have an extra thing taken away. Elizabeth Hunter explaining how life works without touching technology to me is pretty interesting and funny. The characters in this story are, I love the characters in the story. I grew attached to the characters in the story right off the bat. I love the friendships that is created in this world as well. The villains are great too. The villains add an extra layer of craziness to this story. A bit of unpredictability. If you're interested in this, the first couple of books are basically about the romance between Beatrice and Geo. And that is heavy in the first couple of books. I think it's a 4-book series. Once you get past the first 2 books, it is more about this world and what is happening in this world and how Geo and Beatrice are now a part of it and how are they going to respond to what is happening. There's also a spin-off series called Elemental World. In that series, it's the side characters kind of get their own books, and it also furthers the story in this series. There's another layer of mystery that happens. That is my top 5 series written by indie authors. I hope you enjoyed. Comment below. What is your top series by an indie author? Like, subscribe, all that fun stuff. See you later. Bye. Which is not... What I enjoyed about this book was the Okori